Mario and Sonic at the London Olympics 2012 is a game with immeasurable potential, the collision of two of gaming's all-time most established icons, the many years of experience behind its creators, and of course, the lessons to be learned from past entries to the series. The mind boggles then as to why it has turned out to be, in some respects, one of the most oddly inconsistent experiences the Wii has to offer. This latest installment of Mario and Sonic, as ever, adopts the familiar minigame format, and as such, the amount of polish the various events have received fluctuates unfortunately to quite a degree, with many of its issues stemming unsurprisingly from its control mechanisms. It seems development time, or at very least effort, hasn't been too evenly dispersed amongst them. Sega have continued to shy away from using Motion Plus here, and the title is slightly worse off because of this. Games such as trampolining that require rather specific gestures suffer somewhat from a lack of responsiveness. With some genuine improvements made over previous editions, however, the controls are at least getting there, and the dev seems to have earned skill in working around the technology's faults. Waggle-centric minigames like sprints and swimming are still present, but are vaguely more strategic and methodical in design now. Though still certainly not for everyone, there's something undeniably gratifying about the tactile feedback it provides, especially when it's laid out in a manner so satisfying and physically stimulating. Typically, when this type of gameplay is tackled, it comes off as agonizingly dull, but not here. Its competitors could learn well from it. Generally, when the objectives of games become more timing-based with offerings such as equestrian, rhythmic rhythm, and synchronized swimming, is when Mario and Sonic 2012 is at its best. The rather scripted nature of some of these sequences does cut down on replay value a bit, it has to be said, but they're definitely some of the most refined and rewarding parts overall. They tend to be less frantically paced, giving the controls a wider time span to work from, and the end result is unexpectedly a lot of fun. On the other side of the coin, some of the games in here simply aren't too well made. The newly added football, for one, is downright dreary, an awkward midpoint between the actual sport and the miles more exhilarating Strikers Charged. It's a tediously slow, poorly balanced, and altogether humdrum ordeal. Returning modes table tennis and shooting are to a similar extent low on substance, and thus terribly boring. Also making a comeback in this year's game are dream events, extreme reworkings of existing sports taking inspiration from each franchise's universe, incorporating more heavily their themes, characters and locales, an obvious attempt to play on the hearts of more experienced players. Cheerfully nostalgic and rather imaginative though some of these are, the usual gripes remain. Even with them leaning towards more traditional button-based layouts, the controls, namely those involving 3D movement like Dream Rafting, continue to suffer from stiffness. In spite of these recurring handling issues, none of the minigames present could be written off as unplayable. The majority of them, such as the chaotic Smash Bros.-esque Dream Discus and fencing games, regardless of said underlying problems, are still entertaining. This year's Mario and Sonic demonstrates quite explicitly that Sega and Nintendo are trying to broaden the appeal of these games to a wider audience, with Dream Events in particular now more than ever set leveled up more hardcore gamers. This is an effort that hasn't really paid off, however. The package is still rough around the edges, and more or less any experienced player will see right through this. Among friends though, the multiplayer mode can actually be quite the ride. No matter your sentiments towards the product as a whole, it's hard to disagree that it is deserving of some kind of recognition, because it has been skillfully engineered to be one of the most accessible games on the market. The flaws are definitely there, as I've noted, but it's difficult to care for some slightly off controls when, as a multiplayer experience, it works as well as it does. So to an extent, it wouldn't be bending the truth to say Mario and Sonic is still trapped within its initial casual beginner target audience, in spite of its developers' best efforts to change this. The general structure of it all, for one, fails to appeal to this quote-unquote hardcore demographic. Every single mode and character is unlocked from the start, taking away that sense of purpose and reward core gamers do so crave. The actual unlockables on offer, remixes of songs from past games and Mii costumes, provide only a limited draw to players, as great as the music is. The new London Party mode is yet another example of this, an option wherein players explore a fictionalised version of the capital city, competing in various challenges. Gameplay here plods along at one sluggish pace, and its formula is simply far too shallow for it to be played for any reasonable length of time. Despite suffering from this minor identity crisis and a few of the usual niggles, Mario and Sonic 2012 is very much a decent product. It continues to be haunted by a general lack of refinement, and it does still feel like it's for a specific, less scrutinizing audience, but most of its issues are fairly easy to overlook in the face of everything else it has to offer.